So for the next installment of MotoIQ Garage, we're going to tackle probably the weakest point of the GT-R, the brakes. The GT-R has awesome 6-piston Brembo calipers in the front, 4-piston in the rear, big rotors, a lot of pad area. Now these brakes would be killer on any other car, but in the case of the GT-R, you have something that weighs 4,000 pounds with a lot of horsepower and now big sticky tires hurtling around the track, and it's hard to keep any brake system happy under those conditions. So what we're going to do is upgrade the brakes. Some of the things that you have to look out for is the GT-R is a highly electronically integrated car too, so we have to be really careful on how we upgrade the brakes so we don't upset the balance of all the electronics. So we got help from the guys at Brembo and did some really cool stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is upgrade the front brakes. Now to understand this, you got to get into a little bit of the history of the R35. So the first generation of R35 is the CBA, and that had a 380 millimeter rotor that was 34 millimeters thick. When Nissan in 2012 did a facelift on the R35 and they went to the DBA chassis, they upgraded the front brakes because there was complaints about the brakes not hanging. So what they did is they increased the brakes rotor size to 390 millimeters, but they made the rotor thinner, 32 millimeters. So what Brembo's done is they've actually come out with a really big rotor, 405 millimeters, and they kept the 34 millimeter thickness of the early GT-R. So you have the thick rotor with a lot of heat storage capacity, but you have a 405 millimeter rotor that's 15 millimeters bigger than the stock rotor. So you have the best of both worlds. Now, we're going to maintain the stock Brembo 6-piston caliper, but Brembo has supplied these CNC aluminum spacers to actually space the caliper up higher, and so that way, you know, everything fits and it clears on the inside here. Now you have a bigger rotor and you have more swept area, but to take advantage of everything, Brembo came out with these brake pads that are actually deeper than the stock brake pad. So these kind of hang down in the caliper, and they use the entire swept area of the new bigger diameter rotors. The stock GT-R rotors are drilled. That's great for looks, but what happens is if you drive a GT-R hard on the track, you'll probably get cracks propagating through the drilled holes. Then your rotor will really start to mess up. Drilling is not good for big, heavy cars that get the brakes really hot. And so what Brembo's done is they slotted the rotors. The slots do most of the things that drilling does. What the slots do is when the brakes are being used hard, there's like a hot vaporized layer of gas and metal and pad material that can get between the pad and the rotor and cause some loss of braking efficiency. So the grooves sweep that hot layer and eject it from the face of the rotor, so you're getting nice clean contact between the pad and the rotor face. It looks kind of random or decorative, but it's actually done in a way so you get even wear on the rotor, even wear on the pad, and also a lot more edges here so you get better initial bite when you step on the pedal. And it's stuff that you can actually feel. At least according to Brembo. I haven't tried it myself yet. These rotors, like the stock rotors, are a full floating design. So what that means is the rotor can expand and contract and move a little bit from side to side independently of the mounting hat. In conventional rotors, the rotor is just like one-piece casting. When those rotors get really hot, they expand more on one side than the other. And on the side that mounts to the hub, that acts like a heat sink, and it expands less, so the entire rotor distorts like a cone. And that coning can contribute to cracking, odd differential pad wear, and spongy brake feel. So usually your higher end cars and race cars, the hat can float independently of the rotor. So when the thing's getting hot, the rotor's an independent part, it just expands, it doesn't cone out or get all weird. And this part stays independent. You don't get so much heat into the hub's bearing system from the brakes. You don't get as bad knockback in the caliper. Like if the rotor starts to warp, it can float freely on the hat and not knock the pads back into the caliper and cause an inconsistent pedal. So the rotor has unlimited float up and down and maybe about 12 thousandths side to side. Now this is all cool on the race car, but on the street car it can be really noisy. Like the brakes will make a chinging noise that might be bothersome. But what Brembo's done is they've added these leaf springs, and the leaf springs put tension on the whole floating rotor system, so it's not exactly total free play that can bang around and make all kinds of noise. Another thing that's cool about the Brembo rotors is that they're zinc plated. The zinc plating is something that needs to be broken in and worn off in the rubbing area of the rotor. Everyone knows that an iron rotor is going to rust, and when you're on the street, you have this nasty looking rusty band where the pads don't rub. The rust can migrate out and stain your wheels. And the other thing too is when you wash your car, like rusty water comes out of the center vents and can stain your wheels and stuff like that too. But with the zinc plating, the zinc will rub away where the pads rub, but everywhere else will be protected. So your rotors won't turn into an ugly, rusty looking mess. So the rear Brembo rotors have some really cool features too. Now they're the same diameter as stock, but they have some cool features. One of them is the face of the hat is actually smaller, so the rotor has this area, or the swept area of the rotor, is actually taller, so there's more available friction area. And the Brembo pad that comes with the rotors is actually taller and hangs down lower out of the caliper than the stock pad. So the taller pad takes advantage of this wider area and gives more area, surface area for the pad to work on. So you have more swept area and more pad area, so it's more effective. The rotor has an alloy hat. Now the stock rotor, this hat is cast iron. Now it's cast iron because the parking brake has a drum, and the drum works on the inside. So you have the pads being pushed into there. The Brembo rotor is hard anodized aluminum, and the braking surface for the shoes is also hard anodized. Now hard anodized is a layer of really hard aluminum oxide that's a lot higher than iron, but it's also kind of thin. So there's no drifting and no e-brake entries on the car with alloy hat. But for an occasional emergency stop or for parking on the hill, it works just as good. We talked about full floating rotors with the front rotor, and you can see the stock rotor has the full floating hardware. On the Brembo performance rotor, the full floating hardware is actually on the inside of the rotor instead of the outside. So it's still full floating, just the full floating spring clips are on the inside. So the rotor is the same size, but you got more performance and lighter weight. What else could you ask for? To top it all off, we have some of Brembo's high temperature brake fluid we're going to use. It's compatible with OEM systems and ABS and all that, and has a lot higher boiling point. So welcome to the biggest brakes in the world. This is probably the biggest front brake of any car we have ever screwed around with here at the MotoIQ garage. So it's a Brembo rotor that's 405 millimeters in diameter. That's more than 15 inches. But when you're stopping a 4,000 pound really powerful car with really big tires, this is what it takes. Now, Brembo made a spacer that moves the caliper upward so you don't have interference back here on the rotor. And what they did is they ran like a deeper, longer brake pad that hangs down lower to take advantage of the additional swept area. So the new rotor and the brake pad combo uses all of the rotor, gets all of the mechanical advantage, all the swept area, and all the heat sink of a really big rotor. So This car's going to stop a lot better, and with the big sticky tires, they're going to put more load on the brake. It should be able to keep up. Of course, I've talked about the lightweight alloy hat taking the place of the cast iron one that's the factory part, and that's really apparent that it helps. But one of the things is the Brembo hat is slightly smaller in diameter. This allows the Brembo rotor to have more swept area. So even though the diameter of the rotor is the same as stock, the swept area is greater. And to take advantage of this, Brembo made some special pads that hang down lower right here. So the pads are wider, hang down lower, and take advantage of the greater swept area that the hat provides. Pretty cool stuff. Again, a lot of brake area in a small package, and to help balance what we did with the front. Until next time, subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to MotoIQ.com and read all about it.